Welcome back to Quest for the Cure's final chapter, Episode 3. We're Ty and Charlene Bollinger, and we hope you learned a lot from Episode 2. But just in case you missed it, here's a brief recap.
All the cancers are the same. Cancer starts from damage to the respiration, regardless of the tissue, the cell, or the organism.
You cannot look at cancer with the paradigm of carpet bombing your body, declaring war on an invader. It's not an invader.
The body is not crying for radiotherapy or chemotherapy. It's just crying to heal itself.
The trouble with chemotherapy and conventional treatments is they have no effect on the cancer stem cell.
The latest research from Harvard Medical School and UCLA is showing that chemotherapy actually stimulates cancer stem cells, which are the germ cells from which new tumors arise.
So there's a dogmatic view of what this disease actually is. Look at the board of Susan Komen breast cancer. Every one of the people, the scientists on the board of Susan Komen, thinks that cancer is a genetic disease. They're looking at gene mutations. Irrelevant. It's irrelevant.
Nothing could be further from the truth. Cancer is very rarely has a genetic component.
Epigenetics, if people don't know what that means that something will act upon your genes.
Vitamin C was just found in a university in England that it kills cancer stem cells. Ellagic acid also. Green tea extract, EGCG.
Micronutrients give, in layman's terms now, give the cancer cell two options. Either you think about how you operate properly and become a healthy cell again, or you die.
Rictvir, it's non-pathogenic. It's a safe virus. It doesn't cause any disease, and what it does, it's infecting the cancer cells actually.
So the Nobel Prize for medicine in 2011 was awarded for 3 researchers who discovered the function of dendritic cells.
We have close to 100,000 references from scientific journals that tell us about diet, vitamins, minerals, botanicals, natural energies, and so forth, and their influence on health. So, Ty, don't let anybody ever tell you that this isn't scientific.
The main reason why we succeeded, actually summarizing it in one word, was science.
Merck, Sanofi, Glaxo, and Pfizer are 4 of the most corrupt companies in the world. Those 4 companies collectively, they're serial felons. They've paid $35 billion in the last 10 years for falsifying science, defrauding regulators, lying to doctors, selling drugs that they knew were poisonous and that were going to kill people.
We've worked on maybe 10 to 15 cases in vaccine court, and we found that court to be, as I've said, beyond corruption to just pure evil. So most of the cases we do right now are Gardasil injury, and they're things including like cancers, leukemias, lymphomas.
When you look at every package insert for every single vaccine, that there's a line that says, for every vaccine has never been tested for mutagenicity, which means transforming cells, has never been tested for carcinogenicity. Does it cause cancer?
It also says it's not safe for pregnant women, and it's not tested in children for those same properties.
In 1960, an NIH scientist, Bernice Eddy, found that rhesus monkey kidney cells that were used to produce the inactivated Salk vaccine caused cancer.
So she noticed these tumors were occurring at the injection site and also distally in the lungs and the kidneys after injection.
Many health benefits have been identified for infection from things like measles. Some of those include reduction in cancer risk.
If a woman had measles and mumps as a child, her risk of ovarian cancer is cut in half.
Vaccine censorship was a large reason why I ended up blowing the whistle on Google, because I realized that whatever side you fall on the dividing line, if you're on the side that's censoring mothers with vaccine-injured children, you are not just doing something that's wrong, you're doing something that is repugnant to God.
My main mission is to lift up the individual's self-healing mechanism, and how to do that through proper cleansing and detoxification.
You are worthy. You are the most worthy being in the universes of God. And that healing is yours if you'll just open up and receive it, accept it, don't fight it, don't resist it. Let it rush over you, through you. It is your birthright.
In episode 3, we're going to go over the basics of an anti-cancer diet. We'll discover how to fortify your own personal immune army, and we'll learn about some powerful integrative options for treating cancer. Speaking of the army, we'll also uncover the roots of the war on cancer.
Grab some organic popcorn and a hot tea and get ready to go. This is going to blow you away.
But before we get into the meat, or the plant-based protein if you're vegan, of this episode, here's a question that always comes up about chemotherapy, which is the #1 conventional weapon to combat cancer and win this cancer war.
What percentage of oncologists would choose chemo if they or their loved ones were diagnosed?
There's a study that came out about 90% of physicians, particularly in oncology, would not prescribe the drug that they give to their patients to their wife or their child. Right? So what does that tell us?
He's probably not going to do his treatment. Why would you?
In 1971, U.S. President Nixon declared a war on cancer, but are we really winning this war in light of the fact that 90% of oncologists won't even take their own treatment? Is the cancer industry any closer today than they were then in finding a cure? Why does this perpetual war on cancer continue?
One of the reasons why this war continues is the money that are being made in this war. And this refers to the treatments, so-called treatments that are being used in cancer, namely chemotherapy and radiation. Chemotherapy uses the most powerful toxins known to humans, and these toxins, of course, are being sold to us as substances that can kill cancer cells. But these substances also annihilate healthy cells in the body, damage its organs, which make the recovery from cancer almost a miracle, impossible. And also the very substances that are being used to fight cancer are cancer-causing chemicals. So instead of eliminating cancer or curbing cancer, we are inducing, generating new cancer.
We have to admit that healthcare is a business in America. In fact, there are vested interests in this business of healthcare. It's a $2.7 trillion a year medical industrial complex we have in America.
The cancer medical complex is this whole monolith that's been set up to make money on cancer. And so let's take the woman who is young woman who's been feeling a breast lump, goes to her doctor, she goes for a mammogram, they pick up something, she's going to go for a biopsy, they pick up something, now she's going to go for an excision, they tell her she's got cancer, she's going to get chemo and radiation. It's this whole system set up to treat cancer, and it's a multi-trillion-dollar industry right now. And the problem is people aren't living longer from these therapies.
If the money had been poured into immunotherapy over the last 50 years, as it has been these other attempts that ended up failing, I'd have to believe that the results would be a whole lot better. Certainly been a lot less suffering. I think anybody who has met or been close to someone undergoing chemo and radiation will admit that it is a suffering instead of a treatment.
When a cancer patient suffer, and first thing is they need nutrients. They are not deficiency of chemo. We are deficient of nutrients. So first thing is give them sufficient nutrient, and the body has a system that can heal. This is the immune system, we call it. Right? So we cannot do anything to sacrifice our immune system just for the sake of treating.
In order for having a maximum chance of fighting and overcoming cancer, we need an intact immune system. And that too makes the current approach of chemotherapy so unethical. It destroys the chemotherapy, the first organ that is affected, actually the target organ, is the bone marrow. The destruction of the generation of defense cells, leukocytes, etc., are built in the bone marrow. So from the very onset, from the very planning of chemotherapy, from the very scientific approach, it is a deception. It is an unethical, deceptive business that creates illusions for millions of people, and every scientist involved in it. I'm not blaming the doctors. They sometimes don't have the education to go at that length, but every scientist knows that it is a huge fraud. And those who say they don't, they should quit the job of being a scientist.
There are many physicians who are truly authentically motivated to want to help people, but there is this pervasive fear that they are going to be discredited and ostracized in their own community, and when they start to embrace some of these alternative philosophies. So that's a strategy that's used to suppress this type of information. When you've got tens of billions of dollars of revenue, there is no limit to the clever and sophisticated techniques that you can acquire to manipulate the masses.
It's against law in California for oncologists to recommend integrative.
Is it really?
They cannot tell you go do integrative medicine.
So unfortunately, doctors in America, Australia, the UK, they can risk losing their medical license if they recommend anything other than the gold standard, which is chemotherapy and radiotherapy. In my mind, those treatments are substandard. So we know that chemotherapy and radiotherapy cause cancer, which is the very thing they're supposed to prevent. I mean, you look on the back of certain chemotherapy drugs like doxorubicin, and you'll see a listed side effect is leukemia.
If we have to use something that is known to cause cancer, radiation is immunosuppressive and causes cancer, to treat cancer, we failed in the field of healthcare, period.
Dr. Marty has a point, doesn't he? Why don't doctors pay more attention to the immune system? After all, it is our own personal army to defend us. And why don't cancer patients have the option for integrative treatment? In other words, using whatever works to heal them.
Sadly, in the USA and across the globe, many doctors are afraid they will lose their license if they opt for a natural or integrative treatment. There is tremendous pressure placed on them by Big Pharma and the cancer industry to only prescribe drugs to treat cancer. The system is broken, but we're trying to fix it.
If you have a fully functioning immune system, you cannot have cancer. Now, what's one of the main things that compromises the immune system other than the conventional treatments like chemo and radiation, which, yes, they do compromise the immune system. They devastate the immune system. But what's one other thing? A common substance that people eat on a daily basis: sugar.
If you are working to get a healthy immune system, one easy fix is to eliminate sugar from your diet, because sugar impairs the immune function and sugar feeds cancer. So why do many oncologists' offices have candy at the front desk?
And how can the oncologist's office, and I've seen it where you go into their office and they have candy bowls with candy there because cancer patients on chemotherapy are so weak and they need a little pick-me-up. And I have looked at that at different times in oncologist's office going,
what are they thinking?
What are you thinking?
When you finish your chemo in a conventional setting, they give you cookies and ice cream or candy. That is tantamount to putting gasoline on a fire. That means these oncologists are guilty of crimes against humanity. They are killing their patients.
One of the tests that we use to diagnose cancer is a PET scan. So with a PET scan, we take radiated sugar, right, and we inject it in you. Because cancer cells take up sugar so much more efficiently than normal cells, they will take up that radiated sugar, and then we're able to see on the CAT scan where the sugar is, which that tells us where the cancer is, right? So yeah, so we're very aware of the dependence on cancer cells for prodigious amounts of sugar. And that's why cancer patients die of starvation, is because the cancer cells will suck up all the sugar from normal cells.
So sugar, we talk about it's a big problem. Yes, it's a big problem. I mean, sugar is wonderful. Everybody likes sugar. I like sugar, but I choose not to thrive on sugar. See, sugar should have been in our fun foods, building blocks, fuel, and fun. Okay, fun foods. Every now and then you have sugar, but sugar, 100 grams of carbohydrates. I saw a study that was either 100 grams or 200 grams recently, where it said that, like you had a pizza meal, for instance, or a pasta meal. Within 15 minutes of eating that meal, your leukocytic index, which is basically, essentially, a white blood cell, how many bad guys can it eat in an hour? The study was suggesting it should be about 16 per white blood cell in an hour. But within eating this carbohydrate meal, within 15 minutes, you've dropped from 16 to 1.9 and hold that for hours.
So you have 10% capacity that you used to.
10% capacity, and basically these patients are often in an immune compromised state to start with. Some of the treatments they are getting are taking their immunity down to almost nothing, and then they're throwing sugar in on top of that, which directly feeds the problem, but it also directly takes a whack at the immunity. It's a terrible cycle that people need to consider. 1 century ago, sugar was a delicacy, you know, so you'd have maybe mom would make an apple pie, or you go to the store and get a little treat or something like that. 5 pounds a year, it's estimated, would be the intake of sugar per year per person on the average. Today, it's a whopping 150 plus pounds per person per year on the average, and somebody is eating our sugar. So the average is pretty high. The point is, people are eating their weight in sugar a year.
Cancer is an obligate glucose metabolizer, and everybody knows that. This is not new information. I mean, I remember 15, 20 years ago, seeing this, there was a news article, they were covering on the news on TV, and then there was a newspaper article that came out, I think in New York Times or something, I don't remember where it was. And they were talking about how Stanford discovered that cancer feeds on sugar. And I knew this from years before, from reading books that were written before I was even born. So it's not new information, but for people to sit there and say that it's garbage, that you know, this is fundamental basic stuff. So cancer is an obligate glucose metabolizer, cancer is an obligate anaerobic metabolizer. There's certain characteristics that are common in all cancers, and that's our philosophy of how we treat people, is to look at those underlying common denominators and addressing those, as opposed to looking at this treatment or that treatment. We look at things that are going to work across the board for the common characteristics of cancer. And sugar dependency for the cancer is one of those components.
Sugar is, cancer is a sugar feeder. Cancer is what's called an obligate glucose metabolizer, meaning that there is a dramatic uptake of glucose in the cells of tumor cells. If you can lower gut and blood glucose, you can help to slow down cancer.
Dr. Otto Warburg was awarded a Nobel Prize for discovering that low oxygen is characteristic of cancer cells due to a change in cellular respiration from using oxygen to fermenting sugar. So if you want to strengthen your immune system, step number 1 is eliminate sugar. There are lots of healthy replacements if you have a sweet tooth, like stevia, monk fruit, xylitol, and so on.
However, in an attempt to minimize sugar intake, you might be tempted to replace it with fake sweeteners like aspartame. Here's Dr. Russell Blaylock explaining why that's a bad idea.
Aspartame has been studied for a long time, and what a researcher did, he said, I'm going to look at all the research that's been done, those that are sponsored by the makers of aspartame versus independent studies. What he found, virtually all the independent studies found harmful problems. None of the ones sponsored by the maker found any problem.
So you've got to look at who does the studies.
And so what the maker does is he goes out and he pays scientists to come up with articles or ghostwritten articles that says it's safe. And he fills the literature with it. And then when he goes before a camera, he says, look, these are the pile of studies that shows it's safe. And so the news commentator looks at this and says, well, gee, there's been hundreds and hundreds of studies that shows it's safe. They don't even show the real studies that were done, the carefully done studies showed it's not. Now, the carefully done studies show that it's a carcinogenic agent, and that it combines with other carcinogens like nitrites from your food to become even more carcinogenic. They found in the original studies, to get approval for using NutraSweet, in the original studies they found increased brain tumors, about a 6-fold increase in brain tumors. They found increased lung tumors, breast cancers, breast tumors, all sorts of tumors and thyroid cancers were found. But what the investigation did after the approval, you know, because they approved it over all these findings, they found out that they were taking out the tumor from the experimental animal and throwing it away and writing down that it was normal.
Really?
Yeah, all this was discovered. It's under oath in congressional hearing. So a lot of these amoral shenanigans were done to get it approved in the first place. The guy who was head of the committee that approved it, after he approved it, within months, he went to work for the company that was the promoter of aspartame. And so that's sort of this revolving door we talk about between industry and government.
To say there is a revolving door between industry and government is no exaggeration. Later on, we will discuss glyphosate, which causes cancer, and it's the main ingredient in Roundup, which is used on all GMO corn and soy.
Did you know that the FDA does not require a single study to determine whether GMOs are safe? This is the result of a policy overseen by Michael Taylor in 1992 when he was at the FDA. He then moved on over to Monsanto that produces these GMO crops, and he was their chief lobbyist and attorney. He's now back with the FDA as the food safety czar. Talk about a revolving door.
Here's Dr. Blaylock sharing the study that revealed shocking information about how aspartame, which is marketed as a weight loss sugar substitute, can actually make you gain weight due to its effect on leptin. And obesity has been linked to cancer.
What they found is in the hypothalamus is where leptin operates to curb your appetite. And there's receptors there in this particular nucleus, the arcuate nucleus. And so unless that leptin can react with that receptor, it doesn't work. Well, glutamate is the transmitter for that receptor. And aspartame has aspartic acid, which is also an excitotoxin just like glutamate. So it burns out that nucleus, so now the leptin won't work. Leptin levels start rising, which is inflammatory, and you start gaining weight.
23% of all cancers are related to obesity. No one ever talks about that because obesity is running amok right now. This year, overweight and obesity in the US alone will hit 75%, with 41% being obese.
Of all the new cases of cancer, up to 40% of them can be attributed to being overweight. And of them, the people that die from cancer, 20% of them can be attributed to being overweight. So medical researchers have gone on record, and I 100% agree. We have a quote that said, obesity, being overweight, has replaced tobacco to be the #1 preventable risk factor associated with cancer.
In a little bit, we're going to review our top anti-cancer foods, and they also help you maintain a healthy weight. One food that I absolutely love is Asian food. Dr. Blaylock mentioned another excitotoxin, glutamate. If you eat Asian food at a typical restaurant, it's likely that there is MSG as an ingredient. But what exactly is MSG?
Well, MSG is monosodium glutamate. It's just a salt of glutamate. The damaging element is the glutamate, not the monosodium. You forget that. Anything that says glutamate is an excitotoxin. That means it can destroy brain cells. Now, when I did most of my research and writing about excitotoxins, it had to do with the brain, because that's where we thought all the glutamate receptors were. Now we found out that actually there's glutamate receptors in every cell in the body. Not a single cell doesn't have glutamate receptors. What that means is, if you eat glutamate, now you don't have a blood-brain barrier to even consider protecting you, because glutamate goes to all these cells without any interference. And your blood level rises very rapidly and very high over a prolonged period of time. Humans have a higher and more persisting level of glutamate in their blood than any animal that you experiment on. Well, the second thing, once they found out there are glutamate receptors everywhere, is they found out glutamate receptors trigger and stimulate the growth and invasion of cancers of every kind. First, they thought it was brain tumors only. And they demonstrated that if you had high glutamate levels around the tumor became highly invasive and grew twice as fast as a tumor that had low glutamate levels. Then they started looking at other tumors, lung tumors, colon cancer, breast cancer, prostate cancer, thyroid cancers. Every cancer they looked at, they found the same thing. Glutamate acted as a fertilizer, if you will, a stimulant for the growth of that cancer. Made it grow extremely fast, made it highly invasive, and less likely to be cured. Now, the research has continued, and we're finding that more and more. Now, the second corollary is that if you block the glutamate receptor, the cells start dying. Virtually all your flavonoids that I've discussed, curcumin, quercetin, ellagic acid, resveratrol, anthocyanins, they all reduce glutamate receptor activity. And that's their advantage. And they do it safely, so that the brain can function normally, but the cancer can't use it.
Did you notice that the same substances which block glutamate are the same substances that target cancer stem cells? Interesting, isn't it?
This episode is dedicated to our dear friend, Dr. Michael Farley. Mike and I wrote a couple of books together, Work with Your Doctor and A Guide to Understanding Herbal Medicine. He was a brilliant physician, and more than that, Mike was a good man. Diane, we love you, and we know that you miss Mike. Dr. Farley also developed an immune-boosting formula called Life One. We take this every day. It contains curcumin, quercetin, and resveratrol, along with immune powerhouses like chrysin, turkey tail mushroom, dimethyl and green tea.
Another anti-cancer nutrient is called salvestrol, but it's universally deficient in the American diet.
The salvestrol works on an enzyme system. CYP1B1 is the enzyme system that it works on. Well, this is a natural product found in fruits and vegetables that CYP1B1 enzyme converts into a toxic product. So this fruit extract, vegetable extract, acts as a prodrug. It's not a drug. Your normal cells don't have that enzyme system, so it can't convert it. So it doesn't hurt normal cells. But the cancer cells have the CYP1B1, so it converts it into a toxic substance, killing the cancer cells. Natural fruits and vegetables produce it just in the last day or two, right as they become ripe, because that's when they're higher in sugars, and that's when fungi tend to attack the fruits and vegetables. So that's when they make salvestrol. Who eats vine-ripened fruit today?
Unless you have your own garden, you don't.
That's it. Nobody, because it's all picked green.
Yeah.
I don't care if you're eating it in a natural food store or an organic food store, it's still picked green to ship to you. Because that's the only way they can get it there and not lose half their produce to spoilage. So we are eating all this food that's salvestrol depleted, one of the very agents that Mother Nature uses to kill cancer cells, which Mom and Pa got back on the farm.
In my clinic, I use salvestrol. Salvestrol is containing fruits and vegetables and herbs. Cancer cells has an enzyme of CYP1B1. Does not. But normal cells does not. Once salvestrol enters the cells and CYP1B1, it changes the salvestrol to the apoptosis-induced substances. On the other hand, normal cells has no CYP1B1, so salvestrol does not have any effect. So salvestrol is natural to the body and also does not harm the normal cells, only kills the cancer cells.
Wow, that's pretty fascinating. So the salvestrol selectively toxic to cancer cells because the cancer cells have the CYP1B1 that causes the salvestrol to create apoptosis in the cell to kill them.
Yeah.
Do I understand it properly?
Exactly.
Salvestrol is produced by natural fruits and vegetables the last day or two as they ripen on the vine, and it works with the CYP1B1 enzyme system to become selectively toxic to cancer cells. But unless you're eating vine-ripened produce, you are probably not getting salvestrol because almost all the fruits and veggies you find in the grocery stores were picked green and they were ripened on the boat or in the truck as they were transported.
Here's Dr. Homer Lim from Manila, Philippines, describing some more potent herbs, roots, and flowers that he uses for his cancer patients.
So when we try to treat the patients, we ask them to use our local herbs. Actually, the local herbs are not only found here, it's found in all of Southeast Asia. So it could be turmeric, could be ginger. Scientific term is Phyllanthus neruri, excellent for liver. We have the periwinkle flower, we can also use that, so we have that also.
Periwinkle flower?
Yes,
okay.
Because periwinkle is there's an active ingredient for cancer drug is from a periwinkle.
Really?
Yes, vinblastine, vincristine, it's from the periwinkle flower.
Really? So some of the chemotherapies are derived from?
Yes, from plants.
Periwinkle.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So these are some of the things that are out there that is actually cheap. You just pick them. Then we also have some of the fruit. The tree is called soursop. We don't use the fruit. We use the leaves. They have to cook the leaves make it into a tea. That's also very good for cancer. We have lots of what we call the cassava root, which is also high in B17. So they blend it and then separate the water from the starch, and then they drink the water, which is rich in B17. I think one of the very excellent things that came out of Europe was the mistletoe. So we do give lots of mistletoe to cancer patients because it helps boost their immune system. Studies, I mean not only studies, hundreds of studies with hundreds of thousands of patients have proven that mistletoe actually not only extend your life but increases or improves the quality of life.
When I saw cancer patients dying not due to cancer but due to chemo, I started studying what else can help these cancer patients. And then I came to know that the second most studied mode of cancer treatment is mistletoe therapy, okay, after chemotherapy and surgery, radiation. Okay. So mistletoe is the second most studied mode of cancer treatment after the conventional treatments. It intrigued me a lot. I kept on studying about it. I kept on reading about it. Okay. And then I used it for a particular patient. I spoke to the doctors around the world who are using it. I started writing review papers on it. I've written review papers and then I got into research papers and then treating patients, and I have seen patients who had no right to live, but are going to their jobs, going shopping and playing everything, they are doing good. The quality of life is as it should be. It's better than mine and yours. Okay. So this intrigued me to pursue this treatment, and then today I am the one who is doing exclusive mistletoe therapy. Okay, and all my patients are doing good. Most of them are doing good.
It's the most prescribed oncological treatment in Germany now, right? You wouldn't believe that, but 60% of cancer patients will take it, whether the doctor says to or not. They will. It's got a very strong tradition, and as I said over here, if you don't think German means it could be good, then Suzanne Somers is your reference, right? She liked it. She claims it really, really helped her, and I've used it a lot, of course.
So I was looking around at that time for what could I do? And I read some books about Rudolf Steiner. And back in the 1920s, he was doing something called anthroposophic medicine. And one of the medicines that jumped out at me was Iscador. It was said that it builds up your immune system to be so strong that nothing can invade or attack. And that kind of made sense because clearly I had cancer because there was some flaw in my immune system.
What is it in the mistletoe that is effective against cancer? What are the chemical makeup of mistletoe?
There are lectins, there are viscotoxins, which induce apoptosis, okay, which act as immunomodulators. Your immune system is boosted up. Due to apoptosis, the tumor shrinks. The tumor markers come down. Your quality of life improves. Your mental ability, your general well-being, your anorexia, insomnia, pain, everything of your weakness, everything comes back to normal.
Mistletoe first grew in popularity as a cancer treatment in Europe during the 1920s. In more recent history, holistic healers and their patients have seen mistletoe injections shrink tumors, boost the immune system, and treat cancer symptoms like pain and exhaustion.
There are a lot of hit pieces out there about mistletoe, just like there are about Laetrile, micronutrients, and Gerson therapy. I guess that's to be expected. Anytime you're over the target, you're going to be attacked. Here's Dr. Patrick Vickers, who uses Gerson therapy at his clinic in Mexico, describing how the AMA was found guilty of conspiracy to suppress chiropractic care in the United States.
In 1987, 4 chiropractors from Illinois, particularly Chester Wilk, he was the head chiropractor that took the AMA to court. They actually took the entire American Medical Association to court, accusing them of having a branch within their organization designed to eliminate chiropractic as a profession, a licensed profession they were trying to eliminate through the use of propaganda. Well, a federal district court judge in Illinois, Susan Getzendanner, in 1987, found the AMA guilty of conspiracy. That was the judgment. So if anybody tells you when you're talking about these things, oh, you're just a conspiracy theorist, you can lead them straight to the Wilk versus the AMA court ruling of 1987, and the judgment was guilty of conspiracy.
Much like we saw in episode 1, The AMA and the other players in the cancer industry are not shy in their efforts to crush anyone and anything that challenges the status quo. It's not conspiracy theory, it's conspiracy fact.
And chiropractic care certainly does challenge the status quo in medicine, doesn't it? In reality, if you're going to be optimally healthy, you must pay close attention to your spine.
So when we look at the spine is the tissue that surrounds and protects the spinal cord.
Right.
So the brain communicates to the body via the spinal cord. Right? And so when we look at it, oftentimes as we work with patients, a lot of people don't understand that our spine is designed to have a certain structure, a very specific structure. And any deviation off that structure directly interferes with the nerve system's ability to adapt and respond to stress.
Okay.
And what are we doing more of now than ever before?
Stressing about everything.
Stressing about everything. We're sitting more now than ever. We're looking at our technology more than ever.
Right.
And even if we go to the gym, we're kind of thinking fitness, we're not thinking structure. So when we look at all the research, some of the most amazing research on the planet's coming out right nowadays, and it says that the nerve system controls the immune system.
Okay.
And then I tell people, what impacts your nerve system? And they say, everything. Everything we do impacts the nerve system.
Okay.
The only question is, are we doing the things that make it healthier, or are we doing the things that break it down?
在脊椎的部分的话，其实人是一个 balance， 是一个平衡的状况。所以一般来说，我会从脚到头来看一个人的平衡点。然后其实中医有所谓的经络的循行。那当Chiro把脊椎放对在正确的位置的时候，当它在对的位置的时候，经络就可以很顺利的循行。这是一个整个人能量的阴阳的平衡的开始。所以在Chiro的这部分，非常的重要。其实在美国的Chiro，其实在中医的概念就是把经络调成平衡，让气血可以走，就 OK 了。
Keeping your spine healthy and not having nerve impingement is really important, because it's recently been found that having pinched nerves in your spine is actually mimicking a chronic fight or flight state. You know, fight or flight is really good if you have to run away from the dragon or fight the bear or whatever. That's what fight or flight was designed for.
That's interesting. Nerve impingement causes you to be in constant fight or flight.
Correct. It sets up this adrenal gland secretion in your body, and the adrenal glands are the glands that are your stress glands. You need the adrenal glands for energy. If without adrenaline, you don't survive. So when you wear those out, then you go into exhaustion. So it's important that there be some reversal of the stress process every day, and meditation is a great way to do it. Exercise is a great way to do it. Yoga is a great way to do it. Going to a bar is not a great way to do it.
Unless it's a juice bar, right?
Unless it's a juice bar, there you go.
Unless it's a juice bar. We love our fresh juice. We'll go over juicing and a lot more in episode 7, so you definitely want to tune in for that episode.
In the meantime, are you learning a lot? Are you enjoying this docuseries? Do you want to join the movement and support our mission to share the truth about cancer with the world?
Then please consider supporting our cause by owning the complete docuseries. Big Pharma and Big Tech are trying to censor us into oblivion, so we really do need your help. Your support allows us to continue spreading the truth for free, just like we're doing right now. And as always, a portion of each sale gets donated to charities that are doing real cancer research and supporting cancer patients.
Simply click the banner below to join the movement and support our mission. Thanks in advance. Here's Carol Alt at our live event in Anaheim, talking about the power of raw foods and enzymes.
When you cook food, 4 things happen to a raw food. 1, the pH changes from alkaline to acid. It goes from a more alkaline food to a more acidic food. 2 is you're killing the enzymes that would normally digest food. You know, if you leave raw food sitting out, it eats itself. It goes bad. And why does it go bad? Because the air hits it and the enzymes activate and it eats itself. But if you cook it, it lasts longer because those enzymes are killed. So that's the difference between cooked and raw. And the third thing that happens is that the bonds between vitamins and minerals, which are heat sensitive, break. So now your body, which needs to see your vitamins and minerals as a whole food, is seeing bits and pieces and can't really read what it's getting or utilize it as efficiently.
Carol just mentioned enzymes and how important they are in digesting food. They are also particularly important in digesting cancer cells. Here is G. Edward Griffin to explain why.
It turns out that cancer cells have a protein coating around them that needs to be dissolved too. The protein coating protects the cancer cell against the immune system. The cancer cell has a negative electrostatic charge, so does the immune system. The lymphocytes, the monocytes, all of these sites roaming around, they all have electrical charges, and so it meets the electrical charge, negative charge on the cancer cell, and as we know, common polarities repel each other, and so the cancer cell is very well protected against the immune system. But if you have a little bit of the enzyme, digestive enzymes in your bloodstream, they haven't consumed it all by digesting meat in your stomach, why there's a little bit there, and when it hits the cancer cell, it dissolves the coating away from it, and there goes the negative electrostatic charge, and now the cancer cell has a positive charge that attracts the immune system, and away we go. Now you're back to normal health again.
Proteolytic, which are the protein digesting pancreatic enzymes like trypsin and chymotrypsin, actually tear apart the cell membranes. You know, cell membranes are lipid fatty, but they also have protein molecules that are receptors and pores that allow nutrients to get in and waste products to get out. That's how cells survive, with these protein pores in the membrane. And these are proteins like any other protein. We think the enzymes chew them up. Now, they don't affect normal tissue. And Beard said in his book more than 100 years ago that there's a reason that cancer cells have the opposite electrical charge than normal cells. Everyone laughed at him at that time. We now know that's true. And normal cells repulse the pancreatic enzymes in the bloodstream, but cancer cells attract them. The enzymes go right to the cancer cell. We believe chew up the proteins on the cell membrane. The cell does.
Dr. John Beard was an embryologist. He was someone who studied the very earliest stages of development. He was a professor at the University of Edinburgh. And what he had noticed in the course of his work was that there was a particular tissue in the embryo that looked and acted a lot like cancer. And that tissue is called the trophoblast. It's the earliest stages of the placenta. There's one big difference between cancer and the trophoblast. Cancer doesn't know when to quit. It just keeps going. But at a certain stage in a normal development, the trophoblast matures into the placenta, which then does its business for the remainder of the pregnancy, and then after the baby is born, neatly peels off and leaves the uterus intact so another pregnancy can occur. And Beard thought that if he could figure out what the signal was that was making the trophoblast change its character and turn into the mature placenta, he might have an answer for cancer. So he looked at a lot of different things that were happening in development, both in the mother's body and in the baby's. And what he found was maturation of the trophoblast started to happen when the baby started making pancreatic enzymes. Now, bear in mind that pancreatic enzymes in conventional physiology are described to have only one purpose, to digest food. And the baby is not going to see any kind of food for another 7 months. Nature tends to be fairly conservative. Things aren't ready to go until they're needed. Like the lungs, for example, not ready to do their work until the last month or so of a pregnancy. But here the baby is making enzymes 7 months before it's going to see a meal. But if the reason for those enzymes is to change the nature of the trophoblast, then it makes all kinds of sense that they would come about that early. Because if the trophoblast just keeps invading, it could eat through the uterus and kill the mother. No good for the mother or the baby.
So Beard took an animal model, which they had at that time for cancer, and used his enzymes as the first study of enzymes in history, and got 100% regression of cancer in the animals that he treated, whereas the control group died very quickly. Then physicians, he was not a physician, he was an SCD, had a doctorate degree, so he wasn't able to treat patients directly, but physicians working under him began using enzymes. The first case was 1905, a case of head and neck cancer. And the person who administered it, Dr. Clarence Rice, had an office about 5 blocks from this office where we're sitting now, right on Madison Avenue. So it's kind of a historic place to be in terms of enzymes. And the tumor completely regressed, and it was published in the conventional medical literature. I've collected dozens of articles in the peer-reviewed conventional literature from the period 1905 to 1911, where physicians under Beard's guidance treated advanced cancer, colon cancer, rectal cancer, breast cancer, endometrial cancer, lung cancer, successfully with the enzymes. He wrote a book in 1911, The Enzyme Treatment of Cancer. We actually had photographs of patients, sequential photographs of patients with head and neck cancer. The tumors actually disappear and the skin heals normally. 100 years ago, more than 100 years ago. But the work then, as it is today, was considered too controversial.
Too controversial? In other words, using something natural to treat cancer cuts into the profits of Big Pharma. That's the controversy.
For several decades, Beard's work was largely forgotten. Then, decades later, an eccentric dentist in Dallas, Texas, revived Beard's enzyme therapy. In the early 1960s, Dr. William Donald Kelly was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer with little hope of survival.
But Kelly learned about Beard's work with the trophoblast and pancreatic enzymes. After following this protocol, his pancreatic cancer went away, miraculously, and he began sharing his protocol with his patients who were astounded that he was still alive.
Cancer patients began to flock to his dental clinic to learn more about Kelly and what he had done, and the rest, as they say, is history. Over the next couple of decades, tens of thousands of patients came to see Dr. Kelly.
In the 1970s, Dr. Nick Gonzalez, under the direction of his mentor, Dr. Robert Good, who was president of Sloan Kettering Cancer Research Institute, was on a team that traveled to Dallas to investigate Dr. Kelly's patient records. Dr. Gonzalez quickly realized that Kelly was not a fraud.
I went through over 10,000 of Kelly's records, interviewed over 1,000 of his patients, evaluated 455 of his advanced cancer patients who had done well, evaluated 50 at great length representing 26 different types of cancer. Some of these patients we actually saw in our own immunology clinic with Dr. Good. It's really amazing. I wish I had film of this. Dr. Good examining these Kelly patients and writing notes in the official hospital records with his white coat and a stethoscope. We put it together in monograph form. I did the writing, I did the research. He was my mentor. So I evaluated 50 patients with 26 different types of cancer, all poor prognosis or terminal or advanced, who enjoyed extraordinary responses that could only be attributed to Dr. Kelly's nutritional program. Put this together in monograph form, 1986, finished my immunology fellowship. Now here I have Dr. Good as my mentor, the most published author in the history of medicine, 50 books to his credit. He was either editor or co-writer of 50 books, over 2,000 papers, couldn't get it published. The general response were one of two. First, a lot of the editors didn't believe it. In fact, I have some letters in my office from editors who warned Dr. Good this had to be a scam, fraudulent, and I've conned him or something like that, even though we saw the patients in our own clinic and Dr. Good knew they were real. The other thing is, editors would say, this is real, but if it's real, it's the most extraordinary thing in medicine, but it's also the most controversial in nutritional approach to cancer. This is 1986, where to mention nutrition and cancer in the same sentence was tantamount to a felony. And the editor said, this would be the end of my publishing career. The American Cancer Society, the National Institutes of Health, the National Cancer Institute will make sure that I can't feed my children, so they would pass. I tried for 2 years, couldn't get it published, eventually put it away, but finally in 2010 we published it, updated, rewritten with a long introduction by me, updating it to 2010. Now, at that point, Dr. Good was not at Sloan Kettering. I finished my immunology fellowship. We had a long talk, went out to dinner, and he said something very interesting. I don't have it on tape, so I can't confirm it. But he said, you know, some of these cases are so extraordinary, like we a 5-year survivor of pancreatic cancer, which he'd never seen. His own second wife, one of his former wives, married 3 times, had died of pancreatic cancer within 2 months. And he was president of Sloan Kettering. He couldn't save his own wife. She died quickly. He said, you're showing me these cases. He said, I don't know how Kelly's doing this. I've never seen anything like this. And I'm president of Sloan Kettering. I mean, he said, people come from all over the world for my advice about cancer.
Wow, that's fascinating. Dr. Robert Good, who was president of Sloan Kettering, had no idea how Kelly was curing cancer, but he was curing cancer.
Once word got out about this crazy dentist who was curing cancer, Kelly was repeatedly attacked in the press. He was vilified as a quack, investigated by numerous government agencies. The medical mafia tried to destroy him.
Kelly once told me at one time 14 government agencies were investigating him. And I said, I'm an investigative reporter that I am. I said, yeah, people tend to exaggerate. And I looked through the data. Indeed, 14 government agencies, from the local county attorney to the state medical board to the dental board, because the dental board actually took away his license for practicing medicine without a license. He didn't care because he just said he's doing nutrition, kept seeing patients anyway. The state attorneys, the state attorney general, federal attorneys, the IRS, they all colluded, like going after Tea Party groups together. They all colluded to try and get Kelly. You think, here's a guy giving cancer patients nutrition. This isn't like he committed the Holocaust. He's just giving patients with nothing else to do, you can't treat them successfully with any conventional therapy. He's giving them nutrition. And lo and behold, the problem was a lot of them were getting well, which started to upset the medical authorities. And it's interesting too, and these are stories that, as far as I know, have never been told before. At one point he was arrested at gunpoint, kind of like a typical 14, the equivalent of a SWAT team in those days. Arrested him, and they always do those things to try and embarrass you. So they came at midnight in front of his kids in pajamas, dragging him away. I knew 3 of his 4 kids. And they didn't have an easy time because they were the kids of this crazy cancer quack doctor. And you know, the Dallas morning newspapers would carry it in the local radio show. Again, this is pre-internet. And it was tough. They would go to school and be, you know, laughed at. You know, the crazy quack doctor. So it was tough for them.
It is truly a shame that so many good doctors are demonized for healing patients with unapproved methods. Dr. Gonzalez himself was ridiculed and mocked, which is basically the standard operating procedure for the medical mafia. Since they couldn't question his protocols, they attacked him personally.
Sadly, he passed away a few years ago, but his lovely wife and our good friend Mary Beth is carrying on his legacy. Also, Dr. Linda Isaacs, who was Dr. Gonzalez's partner, is still using the successful protocol in her New York City clinic.
Shouldn't we be more concerned that patients get well rather than how they got well? Here in the USA, it seems that the medical industry is more concerned about profits than people. They are more concerned that doctors use the standard of care for cancer, being chemo, radiation, and surgery.
If you do the standard of care and you give chemo and people die, it's okay. If you don't do the standard of care and people live, that's not okay. It's politically incorrect. So this is the amazing thing. You take a poison, you give it to people, they die. It's part and parcel of the normal status quo, modus operandi. This is how it's supposed to be. Now you break that, you actually do something that's not toxic, you help patients, they live. Hey, we don't care whether the patient lives or not, that's irrelevant. It's not part of the standard of care.
This is a total war. Texas Medical Board is going after my doctors, is going after my assistants. They're suing everybody because of using the treatment which is non-conventional.
When it comes to practicing medicine, you can become a good practitioner when you lose the fear of losing your license. And I'll tell you why, because when it comes to medicine, there are certain medical protocols that are considered normal and accepted. And then there's this whole spectrum of treatment methods that are not recognized by the conventional medical establishment. And I know they work, and I know that they're very beneficial. And when I keep the patient at the top of the pyramid and the most important center point, I know I have to use them. But I also know when I use them that I may expose myself to judgment by the conventional medical bodies. They may say either, well, you've used something that we don't recognize, therefore you're on your own, or sometimes they can even reprimand someone for using these methods because they don't think that they're acceptable.
Doctors should not risk losing their license for using treatments that aren't acceptable by the bureaucrats in the medical mafia. Sadly, that happens all too frequently in the USA.
Over the past few years, we've been blessed to be able to travel across the world and interview doctors in dozens of countries. When we visited Manila, Philippines, one of the things that we learned about is their TALMA law. That stands for Traditional and Alternative Medicine Act, which mandates that the government studies and makes available all modalities to cancer patients.
Doctors there do not have to fear losing their license for using an unapproved treatment because all treatments are allowed, as long as a doctor believes it will help the patient. What a stark contrast with the USA. The Philippines, as you can see, it's a very poor country. Most of the people live way below the poverty line, and so they don't have access to treatment protocols that you or I might have access to in the States because they just don't have the money.
One of the things we really appreciate about Dr. Jimmy DiLiaco, who developed a very inexpensive cancer treatment based on Dr. Kelly's protocol, is the fact that it's accessible to the very impoverished people of the Philippines. And it's not only accessible, it's extremely successful because it helps with the invisible cancer cells. They have a protein coating that have to be recognized by the immune system. I think you're going to find this interview with Dr. Jimmy extremely fascinating.
Dr. Kelly's genius was this: dissolve the outer coating of the cancer cell. It is only an animal protein coating. So you can use trypsin and chymotrypsin enzymes, which digest animal protein, to digest that. And after it's digested, you strengthen the immune system so that it will be strong enough when it goes in to kill the cancer cell. However, he was using 150 capsules a day, 72 capsules for the enzymes and the balance for building up the immune system. But we are a poor country. We cannot afford 150 capsules a day. Actually, he cured me 24 years ago of my prostate cancer.
Who cured you?
Dr. Kelly.
Dr. Kelly did.
I got very scared, of course. More so because my older brother, who had lung cancer, died after 18 months. And one of the 4 doctors assigned to him told me, "Your brother did not die of the cancer. He died because the chemo destroyed his kidneys." I got more scared. I said, "What do I do now?" So I started looking for options. But when you do, there are so many alternative options, it's also confusing. I was just so lucky I was subscribing to this newsletter. And one of the interviews, he was interviewing people who got well. They were told, "You have no more chance," but they got well. He was interviewing them. He was interviewing people who got them well, whoever they were. And one of the interviews was with Dr. Kelly. And I said, "Wow, this is what I want to do. I don't have to go to a hospital. I don't have to get injections. I can continue working," because at that time I was an international vice president for the Wrigley Company.
Wrigley Company?
Yeah, in Chicago.
That's very interesting. Dr. Jimmy was an international vice president for the Wrigley Company out of Chicago. Yes, that's the Wrigley Company that makes chewing gum and also has its name on the Chicago Cubs baseball park. As he explained, Dr. Kelly cured himself of his prostate cancer.
And as we covered earlier, Dr. Kelly had pancreatic cancer himself, and he cured himself with the same protocol Dr. Jimmy's about to describe to you, except Dr. Jimmy had replaced the pancreatic enzyme supplements with an inexpensive alternative so that the poor people of Manila can afford the treatment. Here are the steps in his cancer-fighting protocol.
The first step, digest and kill the cancer cells. So to digest the cancer cells, the raw pork pancreas or the pancreatic enzyme tablets or capsules. Take 2 tablespoons of raw pork pancreas 7 times a day, 4 times on an empty stomach to digest the outer coating of the cancer cells, and 3 times with food to digest the food. The pig's pancreas are very rich in natural enzymes, very rich in trypsin and chymotrypsin, which digests the outer coating of the cancer cell, so that then the immune system can go in and kill the cancer cell. Now, you take the raw beef liver. The raw beef liver will build up your immune system. If you're very anemic, if you have leukemia, in 5 minutes, the complete blood count will be back to normal. Now, step 2, the coffee enema. You've got to do that to remove the dead rotting cells, because Kelly told me, if you don't do that, those dead rotting cells will build up in your system, and they're very toxic. They can even kill you.
Nothing is more toxic to the human body than dead cancer. In fact, chemotherapy, though it doesn't work for most cancers, does work for some, like Hodgkin's and certain leukemias. And in a Hodgkin's patient, if you break a tumor down too fast with chemo, you'll kill the patient from the dead tumor. And they call it tumor lysis syndrome. It's recognized in the textbooks. All my textbooks, conventional textbooks, talk about it. Well, Kelly recognized that back in 1963 when he was trying to get over his own cancer. And he started going into the literature, as he always did. He was a great scholar. He would go into the literature trying to find some technique that would help his liver and kidney work better. The liver and the kidney are the body's main detoxification organs. That's for environmental chemicals, our own metabolic waste. The dead cancer are processed and neutralized and prepared for excretion. And he opens up the Merck manual, and lo and behold, they're coffee enemas. You know, the interesting thing, or the sad thing, is the ironic thing, Kelly was brutalized in the media for his use of coffee enemas. We get attacked about it today too. But they come right out of the conventional medical literature. He didn't learn about it from alien space beings being projected into his brain through some mystic psychic experience. He didn't learn about it through some alternative throwaway journal, his local health story. He learned about it from the conventional medical textbooks. The Merck manual is a compendium of conventional therapies, and they were in the Merck manual. Coffee enemas were in the Merck manual right up until the 1970s.
That's fascinating that coffee enemas were actually in the Merck manual until the 1970s, isn't it? Not exactly a quack manual. Dr. Jimmy also utilizes a specialized product called hydrazine sulfate to address the malnutrition and wasting syndrome that is pervasive in cancer patients.
Cachexia is a condition where the cancer cells rob the normal cells of nutrition. So you become very weak, you become very thin, because to survive, the normal cells start eating up the muscle mass of the body.
40% of cancer patients die of malnutrition, not of the cancer. Cancer is a wasting disease. Appetite is affected. You end up in the hospital with food that you're unfamiliar with. Chemo and radiation can induce cachexia, or lean tissue loss. So malnutrition kills 40% of cancer patients.
Hydrazine sulfate rechannels the nutrition to the normal cells. So what happens? The cancer cells starve to death.
And hydrazine sulfate was not invented by some dummy, it was a NASA scientist.
Yes, and that's a scientist. You probably know his name.
Gold.
Yeah.
Dr. Joseph Gold was a NASA scientist, and he did develop a product called hydrazine sulfate, which enables cancer patients to get out of the cachexia cycle, which is also known as the wasting syndrome. If you've seen late-stage cancer patients, a lot of times they look very, very malnourished.
Here's a touching story from a lady named Ingrid who we met in Manila. She shares how Dr. Jimmy's protocol, which literally costs less than $10 per day, actually saved her life.
So I was diagnosed with cancer in December 2014, and it was a very scary experience because I didn't know anything about cancer. None of my family members had cancer. And if we were to look at, let's say, statistics, the chances of me getting breast cancer was very low because I just gave birth to twins and I was breastfeeding, and I was only 37 years old at that time. So after doing the different tests, I did the mammogram, I did a mastectomy. I had my mastectomy at the local hospital in Cebu. And then for the further treatments, I really explored and tried to see what would be best. So a lot of the doctors were telling me to do the chemotherapy, but it didn't sit well with me because I just had a feeling that it was gonna be very toxic for my body. And so I looked around looking for other alternatives. And then I met Dr. Diliaco, Jimmy Diliaco. And he has this natural treatment, so I decided to get on it. And upon further test, I've been clear of breast cancer.
Now that is an encouraging testimonial from Ingrid, and here's another encouraging story from Jeffrey and Jane, who initially learned about natural treatments from our 2006 book, Cancer: Step Outside the Box. And they also credit Dr. Jimmy and his $10 a day protocol for saving Jeffrey's life.
I had this colonoscopy, and they told me that I had a tumor. Okay, my CEA, CEA for blood was about 6+.
That's a cancer marker.
Right, cancer marker.
6+, and when they told me that, and the nurse was a little bit apprehensive, it starts to worry me. Okay, so after that, immediately the doctor said you have to undergo chemotherapy, and so he started me on oral chemo plus RT, radiotherapy.
Radiation therapy. We spent the whole of 2012
going through oral chemo, radiation, I saw him shrink. Literally, his energy was almost zero. He was always on the bed, couldn't get up. He couldn't even hold the telephone. Basically, I saw him, you know, from a very, very healthy person, and he just shrank. On the second chemotherapy after surgery, he had a massive stroke. He couldn't take the chemotherapy. He just suddenly became unresponsive. Nothing could wake him up. His eyes had rolled up. All I could see from his eyes were white. Basically, he was in a coma. They sent him to the ICU, and he was unresponsive. At that point in time, I got in touch with my brother-in-law, who, by miracle, was beside Dr. Diliaco in the province. They were having dinner, and Dr. Diliaco was able to diagnose him with a stroke. So it was very difficult for us because Dr. Diliaco wanted us to have a massive dose of this red, it's called siling labuyo, which is red pepper, very, very spicy. He wanted us to have a massive dose of that. And the oncologist wouldn't let us have it. The oncologist said, but we're giving him a blood thinner. According to Dr. Diliaco, blood thinner will only make the thick blood thin, but it won't address the clots. It had to be the red pepper. So I signed the waiver, which was what the doctor said I had to do. I signed the waiver, and then we administered it to him unconsciously. He had an NGT tube down his throat, and we basically poured the red pepper. I got the cayenne pepper from Dr. Diliaco, poured it down his throat, and according to his private nurse, 30 minutes later, he started to respond. By the following day, he was talking to the doctor.
Wow.
So he was out of his coma.
That's amazing.
He got an MRI. MRI came out. He was clear of clots. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Dr. Jimmy knew what he was doing, didn't he?
He did.
In a study published in August 2014 in the Journal of Agriculture and Food Chemistry, researchers from the Chinese University of Hong Kong found that capsaicin blocks the gene that makes arteries contract, which can lead to dangerous blockages of blood flow. I personally know many doctors who have stopped a heart attack with capsaicin. Now, back to the interview with Jeffrey and Jane and the rest of their inspiring story.
So he started me on a diet of raw pancreas, raw pig pancreas, raw cow liver, and massive enema, coffee enema. Apart from that, I had to eat eggs.
Eggs?
Around 8 eggs a day.
Raw
eggs.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
With red chili.
With red chili to get the capsaicin.
The red chili was there again. So right after that, he started on his detox, and it took us about 2 years. Very intense protocol for 2 years.
So that would have been, what, 2015?
2015, and then around 2015, Dr. Diliaco checked us again and said that he was okay.
No more cancer?
Mm-hmm. No more cancer.
I remember that in the several prayer meetings that I attended, and there are others in the who shared their testimony, everything has a hope.
There's always hope.
Yeah.
Yes, there is always hope. That's our message to you. Cancer is not a death sentence, but sadly, in an attempt to maximize profits, the cancer industry still pushes chemotherapy rather than God's medicine, found in nature, found in foods, in herbs, found everywhere.
Doctors have literally become drug pushers for Big Pharma. Here's Dr. Urban Sani, my college buddy from Baylor University. We actually lived together for a semester there, and he's sharing how the medical system in the United States actually incentivizes doctors to write prescriptions, but not to consult with patients on how to truly get healthy.
In Medicare, when I see a patient, I get, there's two codes that are the most commonly used codes for what's called an E&M, Evaluation Management. That's a patient that I'm seeing in clinic, and I'm evaluating that patient. A 99213 and a 99214. And if I see someone for a 99213 in my area, Medicare pays me $40. And if I do a 99214, Medicare pays me $100. How do I go from $40 to $100? Well, I can sit there and talk to the patient for 45 minutes and document 45 minutes. And obviously, if I tried to claim I saw 100 patients in one day, there's not that many hours in the day, so I'd be caught. Or I can write them a new medication to get to a 99214, and I can do that in 10 seconds. I can write for them to have an MRI. I can write for them to have a surgery. In other words, there's all these things that instantly bring you from a 99213 from $40 to $100, a $60 difference, just by changing a prescription, adding a test, adding a treatment. Whereas if I talk to them about health, I've got to sit there and talk about it for 45 minutes. No doctor can afford to do that. I don't know that it is something that is being done intentionally, but the way the system is set up does not encourage medical doctors to promote true wellness.
Promotion of true wellness must begin with high nutrient food, not with drugs. Nobody is sick because they are deficient in prescription drugs. Many are sick because they are malnourished. Believe it or not, many obese people are actually extremely malnourished.
It's truly amazing the effects that good food and superior nutrition can have on one's health. Here are a few practical eating tips, some helpful nuggets you can start utilizing on a day-to-day basis. And you likely won't hear any of these things from your medical doctor.
Things like celery. We know that celery stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system, which is that calming part of the nervous system. So, you know, perfect snack is a bit of celery with some peanut butter or nut butter, make it a little bit more tasty. And the reason it does that is because it contains this plant hormone called apigenin. And apigenin is powerfully anti-cancer, and anyone can Google apigenin and they'll come up with, you know, a load of scientific references.
One of the best strategies, and I learned this at Hippocrates Health Institute here in Florida, is growing sprouts. And there's a number of different sprouts. There's dozens and dozens of different that you use, but the most efficient and effective one that I found that seems to provide the best value is sunflower seed sprouts. And they're literally, you can purchase them at many health food stores or even Whole Foods, but you'll pay like $30 a pound. But you can grow them yourself for about 10, 20 cents a pound, which is really, it's a simple strategy. You grow them from seed to harvest in about a week, maybe 10 days. Really?
Yeah, that's all it takes. And you say, well, why would I do that? Well, it's easy, it's simple, it's fun. Your kids love to see that. You know, it kind of catalyzes and piques that interest in gardening. But also, they're 30 times more nutrient dense than the organic vegetables you're growing in your backyard. So it's really a powerhouse of nutrition. It's all condensed and concentrated in those sprouts.
And you can grow it in your own house.
Yeah, easy to do, you know, simple to do. Actually, the biggest component of my salad are the sunflower seed sprouts. I mean, there's a study from Liverpool University here showing that, you know, a serve of broccoli a day reduces your risk of colon cancer 50%. Well, imagine then if you're having broccoli sprouts, which contain up to 100 times more sulforaphane than normal broccoli. And people are always a bit like, well, what do I do with the broccoli sprouts? You know, they've got kind of a mustardy flavor. They are quite strong, but I find, you know, if you put them in your juicer with, you know, beetroot and celery and carrot, it kind of, you know, if you're not mad about the flavor, it does mask them a bit.
Yeah.
Just sprinkle a few on salads.
Sure.
I mean, they're so potent that you only need a little bit of them.
The thing which I've paid a lot of attention to recently is eating seeds. Now, I'm going to use that term generally. Seeds would include nuts, it would include beans, anything which you can put in the ground that will grow. A pea would be a seed in that regard. Eggs, you know, something like that. Caviar in particular, fabulous. Okay. So seeds are tremendously valuable because the seed is such a wise little packet. It concentrates nutrients about 20-fold and 30-fold more than the rest of the fruit. So it's this fabulous packet of concentrated nutrition. And what we know is that it's got all sorts of genetic spare parts. If it's not going to be a seed that grows into a plant, that's available for you and I to repair our DNA and our RNA with. It also has tremendous stem cell precursors, especially in the husk of seeds.
The other thing which I often recommend food-wise for people with stress is foods with B6. So sweet potato, pumpkin seeds, seafood, because B6 improves or stimulates serotonin in the body, which is that feel-good neurotransmitter. But there's all these studies recently showing that high blood levels of B6 are powerfully anti-cancer. So you can reduce your risk of cancer by up to 49% by eating a vitamin B6 rich diet.
Fuel your body. not just with enzymes which digest food and help you bring in more nutrition, but fuel it with the fats and the essential fatty acids and essential amino acids that it needs to rebuild, regenerate, and rejuvenate.
Those are some fantastic tips, and Carol Alt is correct. We need fatty acids, and we absolutely love avocados here in our house. We also love sprouts. They're one of the easiest ways to grow your own food and are chock full of powerful nutrition. And alfalfa sprouts, broccoli sprouts, and many other types of sprouts are anti-cancer.
Here's Mike Adams, the health ranger, outlining some culinary strategies which he refers to as defensive eating.
Here is a great life-saving tip. With every meal where you're eating something that is cooked or that has meat in it, or anything fried, for example, where you have cancer-causing chemicals in the food, acrylamides from frying carbohydrates, for example, or even eating toast. If it's brown or if it's black, those are cancer-causing chemicals in the toast, right? You made them by burning it. Any meal where you have that, eat fresh fruit fibers with the meal. That could be strawberries, blueberries are some of my favorite. Strawberries have very thick fibers that tend to latch on to toxic chemicals in the food. Well, when they do that, they carry those toxic chemicals and heavy metals even all the way through your system, and you flush it out through your bowels without it ever going into your blood. So you can actually eat, think about this, you could eat barbecued beef together with coleslaw, which is how they're served here in Texas, right? Barbecue and coleslaw. The coleslaw has, I'm drooling thinking about it, sounds delicious. The coleslaw has cabbage, raw cabbage, and it has anti-cancer effects that counteract the cancer-causing burned fat in the barbecue. So if you're gonna eat barbecue, never eat it alone. The way I eat now, I call it defensive eating. And this is absolutely key. With every meal, you must have raw salad greens or raw cabbage, raw broccoli, raw blueberries, raw strawberries, something that is potent as a plant in its raw state, and it counteracts anything that you're eating. And you should mix this up. Don't always have blueberries. Don't always have strawberries. Pick something different. Your body needs different nutrients. So you need to eat according to what you feel you need, but also in a variety of different colors and different textures in your food. So if you're gonna eat a hamburger, for example, load up on the raw onions and the raw lettuce and the pickles and mustard. Did you know mustard is essentially Chinese medicine? It's the mustard seed, and it's very, very bitter. And these bitters enhance liver function and they boost immune function. Mustard is one of the healthiest condiments that is still in the American diet. Now, if you go to places like India, they use turmeric in everything. They will add turmeric powder to a beverage. They will add turmeric powder to a soup or a stew all the time. They eat lots and lots of turmeric. So it's anti-cancer.
I add it to my eggs.
It's anti-inflammation. Good, yeah. It also enhances the color too, doesn't it?
It does.
So one of the best things that we should be doing in America is eating more turmeric on a day-to-day basis. We should be more like the people of India in that case. But guess what? Turmeric usually has some amount of lead in it because it's grown in soils that have a history of being contaminated with certain pesticides like lead arsenate, a combination of lead and arsenic. It kills insects. They sprayed it on all the crops all over the world for decades, even in the United States. This is one reason there's so much lead in the soil. So if you eat turmeric, guess what? Combine it with a wedge of apple. You get all the benefits of the turmeric, the anti-cancer, the anti-inflammation. Plus, you get the cleansing process of the apple, the fruit fibers, the pectin, binds with the lead. So the bad stuff goes out, the good stuff goes in.
One of the best things that's ever been researched post-Chernobyl was the use of apple pectin to take out from all these children's bodies all of these radioisotopes that accumulated, like cesium-137. They literally saved tens of thousands of lives by simply using apples and apple pectin.
What is pectin?
Pectin is just a fiber that is able to pull out along with some of these heavy metals, bile salts, for example, which can help to accumulate toxins and get stuck in the liver, so they can kind of pull some of that material out, eliminate from the body. So one of the many things you can utilize as a food that, an apple a day keeps the doctor away, an apple a day keeps the Fukushima fallout away too.
Now those tips were worth the price of admission, weren't they? Oh yeah, I almost forgot, this is free. Anyway, however, if you are enjoying what you've seen thus far, and if you're learning a lot, then please
support the mission and save lives. We're a small company that's committed to the truth, and we're fighting Big Pharma and Big Tech, both of which are trying to censor us into oblivion. So we really need your help.
When you support our mission by owning the complete docuseries today, you allow us to continue to research, interview, and share this knowledge with the world absolutely free, just like we're doing right now. So if you've learned something, you've been inspired, you want to help save lives across the globe, or if you just love how it feels to support a good cause, please consider owning the entire docuseries.
And as always, a portion of each sale gets donated to charities that are doing real cancer research and helping support cancer patients. Simply click the banner below to join the movement and support our mission. Thanks in advance. We want to end this episode with another very affordable treatment option from the Biomedical Center in Tijuana, Mexico.
In 1996, when my father, Graham Bollinger, was diagnosed with stomach cancer, we were doing everything in our power to get him down to Tijuana to take advantage of this clinic. Unfortunately, Dad died before we could get him down there to the Hoxsey Clinic, which is now called the Biomedical Center. When we traveled to Tijuana a couple years ago, I was thrilled to meet Liz Jonas. Now, Liz is the sister of Mildred Nelson, and Mildred Nelson was Harry Hoxsey's chief nurse. Their mother had cancer and was told, "Go home and die," by her doctor.
Their father heard about the Hoxsey Clinic in Dallas, and he asked Mildred, a registered nurse, to drive him to Dallas to check it out. While they were at the clinic, Harry Hoxsey offered Mildred a job, but she declined because she thought he was a quack.
Well, Harry healed their mother. She lived to be 99 years old, and Mildred eventually accepted the job and became his chief nurse. What a great story.
The head of the AMA at the time was Morris Fishbein. He was the same man who was head of AMA when Royal Raymond Rife was destroyed, and the AMA wanted to buy out Hoxsey and his formula. They almost signed the paperwork, but
they got to the point of signing the papers, and he said, "You have to make this available to everybody." And they said, "We may not make it available to anybody. We may not use it even." And he said, "No, then I won't sell it."
So they basically wanted to buy it and bury it.
Bury it, yes.
Harry was arrested numerous times. For what were the charges?
All different kinds, just whatever they came up with, But the patient, sometimes he always carried a roll of bills in his pocket with him, a big roll of bills. And he made his money, in my understanding, in penny stock, all penny stock. But he carried a big roll of bills with him, and sometimes he'd bail himself out, sometimes he'd just stay in jail. The patients would come and bring food, and they would circle the whole block. So they would just let him out to get rid of the patient.
Wow. If that's not a testimony to Harry and the treatment, then nothing is. The patients would surround the jail.
Yes,
okay.
Surround the jail. Can you imagine?
No, I can't. I mean, not today.
Yeah.
But this was back when? 40s, 50s?
In the 40s.
40s, okay.
But his patients were very loyal to him because the MAA and FDA, if they would find out they were going to mail medicine to a patient, and they would be standing at the patient's door and take the medicine so the patients couldn't have it. When Mildred moved the clinic to Mexico, he told her, he said, "You have to drop the Hoxsey name." And she said, I can't do that. And he said, "Yeah, you have to. That's what they're after. They're mad at me. They're after me." So that's where the biomedical came in. But then the patients wouldn't drop it. We're still known as the Hoxsey Clinic. And that's what we're put on this earth for. Really. If you really stop and think about it, we're supposed to help each other.
That's right. I have to agree with Liz. One of the main reasons that we are put here on earth is to help other people. And I commend her and the doctors there at the Hoxsey Clinic, the Biomedical Center, for doing this. Here's Dr. Elias Gutierrez describing the protocol that they use.
And basically what everything spins around, it's what is known as the Hoxsey formula. It's a liquid made with a combination of several herbs and minerals, and it, because of the way that it's put together, it selectively targets only the malignant cells. Any cell with a bad DNA or a bad metabolism, those are the ones that are going to be destroyed. Yeah. Of course, there's a few vitamins, there's a diet, which is not a difficult one to follow. And we also use a lot of herbal, both Occidental and Chinese herbal formulas.
The formula that you're using, is this pretty much the same formula that Harry Hoxsey used?
Exactly the same.
80, 100 years ago?
Exactly the same. It was passed down from Hoxsey over to Mildred, and then Mildred brought it into the clinic, and then she passed it on to Liz, she's the owner now, she's Mildred's sister, and we still use basically exactly the same formula as it was being used in Texas.
So if somebody comes into the Hoxsey clinic here and they want treatment, how long does the treatment typically last?
This is a clinic that does something in a different way than most of the regular clinics. We try to do everything on a single day. People come in the morning, they get registered, they go through the laboratory, they go through the x-rays, they get their consultation, a very thorough physical examination, and then we have to wait until we get the reports from laboratory x-rays, which takes a couple of hours, and then we call people up for a second visit in the afternoon, and we explain all the findings to them. We give them their treatments, and they just pick up their supplies and make their payments and go home, same day. Wow. This is something you can do at home. You don't have to be necessarily hospitalized to do it, you know? And they stay on the diet, and they come back for a checkup every 6 months, every year. Eventually just come back every 2-3 years.
Okay. Being a one-day treatment, the Hoxsey treatment, relatively affordable?
I think so. I think we're the cheapest clinic in town.
Are you really?
Oh yeah.
That's so awesome. Almost anyone can afford the treatment at the Biomedical Center, and the treatment is so effective. How effective, you might ask?
Here are a couple of patients who are alive today because of the Hoxsey Clinic. First up is Dave Olson, who shares his incredible story of recovery from non-Hodgkin's lymphoma with a volleyball-sized tumor in his stomach, and there was cancer throughout his bones. The doctors at Mayo Clinic told him that he had 3 days to 3 months to live. Then, we conclude the episode with the unbelievable story of Pam Kelsey, who we believe is the longest surviving pancreatic cancer patient in the world. She was diagnosed almost 40 years ago, and she's alive and well.
Be sure to tell your friends and family to tune in tomorrow for the 4th episode titled Heal Your Heart and Beat Cancer with Laughter, Music, Homeopathy, Frequency, and Light. Enjoy these testimonials. They will definitely help heal your heart.
8.5 years ago, back in August of 2006, I couldn't lay down. Matter of fact, Zach was with me on a motor car trip on the railroad, and the seat belt started hurting on the way back from the trip. We were in about 300 miles, and the seat belt started feeling tight. And the next week I had another trip, and coming back, the seat belt was also tight. And shortly after that, it couldn't lay down. And went to Mayo Clinic and was diagnosed, and the first time they said I didn't have cancer. And in a 2-week period, they found out I did have cancer pretty bad, and it was in my non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. It had it in the esophagus, the liver, the kidney, the lymph nodes all over under the arm and in the groin. I had a tumor bigger than a volleyball in the stomach, and then in the bone, stage 4. And the doctor gave me 3 days to 3 months, and one doctor says, you know, the last guy we treated like you made it 3 days. So it was not a very good forecast. So the day I found out they had it in the bones, I found out at 2 o'clock up in the 10th floor of the Rochester Mayo Clinic at the Ghana building. Things looked very bleak, but on the way from left to Rochester, for instance, we had to be a flight in Minneapolis at 4 o'clock that day and didn't find out till after 2. And we made the plane by 13 minutes to get down here. And it's just there's no chance of living afterwards. But here it's been 8.5 years later, and they have not had cancer for 8 years and 3 months. They have not found it. Mayo Clinic couldn't find it. They haven't found it here. There's no cancer that's visible anymore. I started with Mayo Clinic, had 13 doctors at Mayo Clinic, and they gave me the same forecast of 3 days to 3 months. And then I went up to the University of Minnesota, and then to Fairview Hospital and the Masonic Cancer Center. I received a death sentence from 17 doctors, and the 18th one was down here, Dr. Gutierrez, and it was no big deal to him. It was bad, yes, but nothing special. And as far as I know, I was taking more medicine and more tonic than any other patient I've ever talked to so far. I talked to a lot of patients from down here that I've sent down here, and other patients, but I was taking the strongest dose they had, but I never missed a day of work. And so it never affected my ability to do whatever, but it made the total difference in life. And this life is fantastic. I mean, I got a grandson, I got 3 grandsons, but the only one can come with me once in a while. The other 2 are very busy. And this one here gets to come with me. We do a lot of things together, including come down for Jeep rides and stuff. We would have never been able to have that if we wouldn't have been here to get some help. A lot of help. Life is great. Life is great.
My name is Pamela Kelsey. I was diagnosed with cancer of the pancreas in 1975. I was told that I had a 1.5 years to live at the most if I did chemotherapy, possibly chemotherapy, radiology, the different treatments that conventional medicine has. I chose not to do that after finding out about the clinic in Mexico, and chose to go on their regimen. Thought my life was over, but it was too soon to be over. I was only 34 years old, and my husband and I had started a business called Leading Estates of the World. We traveled the world. We saw the most beautiful properties all over the world, and enjoyed the business very much. I wrote and designed for the magazine, and we were in a very happy relationship, and I just wanted a solution. I was always proactive to trying to, if there's a problem, I'm going to fix it. And so a friend of mine, I had this horrible pain, just terrible, terrible pain. I was in bed off and on for about 1 year with low blood sugar, abdominal pain, and then it got worse and worse to the point where I felt like I had a knife through the middle of my chest and out my back. And so a friend said, I know a friend who was cured. She had inoperable cancer of the colon, and she went to a clinic in Mexico, and she's 5 years clear of cancer. So my husband and I didn't waste any time. We came right down to Mexico, and we had went through the physical, and I was still very nervous about everything, but we talked to patients down here. There must have been 40 patients down here with similar stories. So I began to gain hope and confidence that this was something that would really work. And so I took the medicine home, the tonic and the supplements. I was very diligent, religiously so, about sticking to the diet, doing everything the doctors told me. And within 1 year, they had told me that within 3 months I would start to feel better. And so it was almost 3 months to the day that I was able to start not having so much pain. My migraine headaches were not so frequent, not so intense. And I gradually month by month, stopped having the pain in my abdomen. I could start digesting my food, and I got better. And within 1 year, I was clear of cancer of the pancreas. And it was just so amazing because I knew that very few people survive cancer of the pancreas. And over the years, of course, since then, I don't know of anyone that survived as long as I have. And then we had another episode in our life because in 2011, I came to the clinic. I'd been under a great deal of stress. We'd had a lot of situations that were challenging. And so I came to the clinic for a physical. And I didn't expect anything bad, but I just wanted to come and have the doctor help me with some of the stresses, and I wasn't reacting very well to stress. So we went to St. John's Hospital. They did a CT scan, and they detected lesions in the liver up to 3.9 centimeters. They were hypoechoic, which meant that, and they said, so liver neoplasm cannot be excluded, and that meant that, as I was told, that the density of the tissue was so dense that that's what is normally from cancer. So I immediately came down to the clinic then and had another CAT scan, and that confirmed that I did have cancer I had 22 focal lesions on the liver, and they put me on the treatment. I felt like I'd been totally blindsided because I'd been free for decades of cancer, and here I had this terrible diagnosis, and it was so surprising to me. Pancreatic cancer was much more painful. This was very subtle. It was just, this full feeling in my body and a little bit of pain. They asked me to come back in 3 months, so I couldn't wait 3 months. I was wanting to come back sooner and see what was happening, so I came back in 2.5 months, and all but 3 of the lesions were gone. And it was an unbelievable feeling. It was just so unbelievable that here, 50%, they said, of my liver had been affected by all the lesions on the liver. So 50% of my liver was bad and had cancer, and here I had only 3 small spots remaining. And then within the next physical, very shortly after that, showed that there was no more cancer. I'm the longest, to my knowledge, the longest living cancer survivor of the pancreas, and I'm alive and well 40 years later. The doctors have confirmed that there is no longer any trace of cancer in my body, and I'm just radiant with happiness because I know that this treatment works, and I know that had I done the conventional treatment, I wouldn't have lived. We just, Bob and I just owe my life to you and to your sister, and yet you've carried on. Mildred, it was her life work. She was totally devoted. She moved from Dallas to here, she could have had a totally different life, but she was so committed.